Hi everybody, I'm Phil Fatica, and welcome once again to the new and revitalized Channel 9 Government Channel. Thanks for joining us. We are so glad to be back with you. And I am so glad to extend a very hearty welcome to the new president, the new CEO of WQLN Television and Radio, Mr. Tom New. He's sitting on the couch, and he's brought with him the list of people who have been chosen to be in the new inductee class, the 6th class, as I understand it, of the Hall of Fame. And these are people that we all know from a large area that we all live in. So, Tom, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us.
Phil, thank you very much,
shows.
and welcome. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that we're now doing the show up here.
Yes, you are.
I feel like I'm Ed McMahon, and you're Johnny Carson.
Oh, I'd like that. Yeah.
So I'm hoping you'll have an envelope you can put to your head and announce the first member of the Hall of Fame.
And, well, I'm going to tell you what. Why don't you do that?
Okay.
Okay, 6th class, Hall of Fame. Who is it?
Well, may I just do a little bit of a
Please.
teaser first?
Yeah.
The one thing that I find that's so interesting about these 5 new members is every one of them can be connected with somebody else that's already in the Hall of Fame. So the first member to the Erie Hall of Fame, and I've got my cheat sheet here so
Please
I don't make any mistakes, is a children's book author. You know, we already have Ruth Newton is in the Hall of Fame, and she was the illustrator of all those Mother Goose books right here from Erie, Pennsylvania. Well, the first member to go into the 2013 class of Hall of Fame is Virginia Sorensen. And she's a kid who was born 100 years ago in Utah. And she grew up there. She grew up among the Mormon church. She was always a gifted writer. And she became a writer of adult literature. She married, her husband moved her around the country, and eventually she ended up in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, during those travels and during her time in Edinburgh, friends of hers would say, you know, you write such amazing stories for kids. You tell such great stories. Maybe you should try a children's book. And so she did. And she wrote a children's book, and it was modestly successful. But then her next book, The Secret of Maple Hill, she wrote. That was the book that she got all of her attention. What's interesting about this book, it is a story of a family that lives on a maple farm. And the father in the book is returning from World War II. And he was a POW, suffering from post-traumatic stress. This is the first time in literature that this ever showed up, and this is in the 1950s, right? And so the family was in crisis because they had to figure out, how do we deal with Dad? How do we cure Dad? Well, and that's what the story turns out to be. It's a very good, very tight family story, and the story won the Newbery Award, and Virginia Sorensen is the only Newbery Award winner from Northwest Pennsylvania. The Newbery Award is the award that's given to what my children called the chapter books. You know, the Caldecott Award is the award that's given to the illustrated books. And that's exciting.
That's wonderfully exciting. Now, you have to ask yourself, well, how do you get here? How does the process happen? And we'll review this a couple of times. You have to, by the way, can you see this someplace, this Hall of Fame? Do you have a website
The Erie Hall of Fame is online, eriehalloffame.com, and at eriehalloffame.org. And you can see all the new members right there online. You can visit the Maritime Museum. It's right there in front of the Maritime. Yeah, the kiosk is right there. And it's right there at the Maritime Museum, and you can look at and watch all the little films that WQLN has made for the members. And we're also at the airport. And what I like about that is being on the bayfront, our original port, right, out at the airport, and you know a little bit about the airport, the new runway. That's our port of today and tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
So there's something that's just...
a lot of places to see more about what we're talking about. You can see it online, halloffame.com, halloffame.org, the Bayfront Museum at the airport. And I just think it's incredible that these people whom, some of them I've heard about, I'm sure you have too, and some of them you go, oh, wasn't that fascinating? Let's talk about the next one before we decide how does somebody get nominated, and then how do you make the selections from all those who get nominated? Now, Virginia, I will admit, I am not familiar with, but this next person, I am, and this is a name that keeps cropping up a lot in Erie about every August, I think it is, or so.
Yeah.
And who would that be?
Well, his name is Daniel McLaren. Now,
McLaren.
I know that you know who it is, and you're thinking,
Yeah.
who is that?
Yes.
Well, Daniel McLaren ended up adopting his mother's maiden name as his professional name. He's known better as Dan Rice.
Dan
And
Rice.
I think that Dan Rice, you know, is somebody who should have been in this Hall of Fame maybe years ago. I mean, he's such an important figure in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Is it fair to say that probably, as I understood it, he would be the inventor of the modern circus, or he certainly is the progenitor of this, at least? He shaped and molded things differently?
Yeah, he really did. He was the one that came up with the concept of a three-ring event. So there are multiple acts that you could look at one time. When he got his start as a clown in Pittsburgh, and he finally saved up enough money that he was able to buy some animals. His first one was a horse. In fact, as a side story, to Dan Rice, he's also added a lot of expressions to our lexicon. He was the one that came up with the one-horse town.
Really?
Only because when he was originally traveling this small circus around the country, it was him and the horse, and he was a clown. So he would just do the small acts and things like that. But he grew the circus, and it would winter right here in Girard, Pennsylvania. And another thing that he came up with, expression, he referred to it as the greatest show on earth. Now, I'm sure that you've heard that at some point in your life,
Not P.T.
right?
Barnum, huh?
Yeah, no, this was our guy. This was Dan Rice. So besides inventing the modern circus, and also really giving the instruction manual on how to be a circus clown in the modern circus, he did some other things. You know, he ran for political office. He ran for president of the United States.
Really?
Dan Rice was the first person. He built the first monument to war dead of the Civil War. And that was built right here in Erie County, Pennsylvania. And it's that big obelisk out in the middle
Right on
of
Route 20
downtown
there.
Girard. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Nowhere else. They didn't build it in New York City.
Yeah.
They didn't build it in Washington. It was right here.
So he
in
took
our
a
area.
stage name in a sense then. I mean, is there any reason why he kind of didn't keep his given name?
No, it's more memorable.
Yeah,
You know? Yeah.
Okay, so we have Virginia Sorensen, an author, The Secret of Maple Hill from Edinburgh. Dan
And
Rice.
she has the collection to Ruth Newton. Now, Dan Rice, a contemporary of his.
The link is?
Harry Keller. And he was the most popular entertainer in the world in the last years of the 19th century. You know, and so to have these two guys in the Hall of Fame, it speaks well of our community.
Oh, absolutely.
Most popular entertainer in the United States, plus the most popular entertainer in the world, right from our shores. I feel pride.
You're darn right.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
Now, I want to, before we get to the third one, this is one I'm pretty sure everybody's going to know, by the way. What's the process? Well, people are watching us saying, well, I know some great people, and I'd like to nominate them. How do they do that? And then what's the selection process for once they're nominated? How do they get selected?
Well, the process is that you go to the website and you navigate through there, and you'll find that you can submit a 250-word essay on anybody.
Okay.
But there are a couple of things that the Board of Governors from the Hall of Fame are specifically looking for. Number one, the person has to no longer be living. We don't want this to turn into, you know, like a political kind of a thing where people are trying to, you know, win office in the Erie Hall of Fame. So you have to no longer be living. The other thing is you have to do something on a global scale. And just about anybody in the Hall of Fame, certainly any of the people that we're talking about right now, they've all done something that has somehow touched a much larger world outside of Erie County.
Right, okay. So you submit
and then the third
your
one,
guy, your girl.
Yeah, and the third one is you have to be from Erie. And that's one of those things. I mean, we just talked about somebody from Edinburgh. We talked about somebody from Girard. So that from Erie becomes one of those things that the Board of Governors, they say, we'll recognize that person when they're from Erie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it fair to say who are the Board of Governors? Who is?
Well, Dr. Tom Gamble from Mercyhurst, Michael Furman from Destination Erie, Marlene Moscow from PNC Bank,
All right.
John Vanko is on this from the Erie Art Museum, Carl Anderson from the Jefferson Educational Society. It's really a very good board, and Cynthia Wyeth. And what she does is she houses a collection of photographs about East Side history called the Wyeth Collection. And so we're really very pleased with this Board of Governors.
Are you on the board?
I am not on the board.
You're not on the board. Okay. All right.
I think that I have to be from Erie. I have to be no longer living before them.
Okay. So we have Virginia Sorensen, we have Dan Rice, and then number 3 is certainly, I would say to myself, why didn't he qualify a couple of classes before this? I mean, this, you have to know about this person, obviously. Yes, this person is?
Edwin Drake.
Edwin Drake.
Yes, and I want to make sure that I talk about his companion in the Hall of Fame, Colby, who invented frozen food. You know, what Edwin Drake did is, my guess is that if you were to talk to a lot of kids or something, you know, students, they would say, what did he do? Well, they would say he discovered oil. Well, we've been burning oil for thousands and thousands of years. He had nothing to do with the discovery of oil. Up until Edwin Drake entered the scene, the way that we collected oil is there would be pits in pools of oil that we could scoop it up, and we could collect it, and we could use it to burn, to heat, to do whatever it is that we wanted to do with this mineral. It was difficult to collect because it was like a bucket process, you know, that you would just collect the thing, and you certainly didn't get enough to power every automobile on the planet or something like that. The problem was with collecting of oil is that when you would try to drill down into the ground, a couple of things happen. The material you're drilling through collapses on itself.
Yeah.
It becomes, drill bits get very mushy and dull, and it makes it very complicated. So what Drake did is he came up with a new kind of a drill. And the idea, and I'm going to wrinkle this, is the drill looked like this, like a paper towel holder. It's a tube, and you dig a hole and you put this in. The drill goes through this, it drills a little bit, and then this gets pushed down. This is called a drill pipe, and this is what revolutionized oil collection all around the globe when he came up with this.
Is it fair to say that that's the way they do it today now?
That's
still?
the same way they do it today.
Okay.
Exact same way. And we do that with oil, and we also do that with gas. But so he came up with this process, and so he's in Oil City, right, the oil region, where everybody's collecting oil from pools and digging holes and things like that, or hand-dug wells. And all of these other oil guys, they're like, this is crazy talk, and they're you know, they're making fun of him and things like that. Well, they nicknamed, it took so long for him to hit oil. You know, it was around 62 feet. When, by the time he passed the 30-foot level, they referred to the drill pipe as Drake's Folly. You know, but when it worked, it worked. Now, then what happened to Drake? You know, well, very much what happened to John Colby, another member of the Erie Hall of Fame, invented the process for frozen food. And if you ask anybody on the planet today, who's the king of frozen food, they'll say, well, Birdseye. And mostly because Colby didn't patent a lot of his machines. He just gave them away.
Really?
He just shared the technology.
Wow.
Same thing with Drake. He built the drill pipe that was used to collect all of this oil and just gave the technology away. Other people patented it. He ended up penniless, you know, dying penniless.
He made nothing off of this.
No, well, initially he did,
Yeah.
but certainly not enough to sustain him into a, you know, a comfortable retirement.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know that there are still tours that take place at, you know, in Titusville. On
They do a very nice
the
job
Drake's
down
Well.
there.
Oh, yeah. If you've never been there, it's a great place to take the kids and say,
They just celebrated their 150th.
yeah,
and
it started right here. This is where it all began. All right, so we have Virginia Sorensen, we have Dan Rice, we have Edwin Drake, and then I'd like to pride myself on the fact that I know most of these people, or at least I've heard of them. This one, no. I'm not familiar with the next person.
You know, a lot of people living in Erie today would say that they not only knew Don Allstadt, but that they were friends with Don Allstadt.
Okay.
I personally did not know Don.
Okay.
But I do know people that did know him. To talk about Don Allstadt, you really have to talk about Hugh Lord.
Okay, yep.
And he went into the Hall of Fame 2 or 3 years ago. And what his contribution to the world is that he lived on 5th Street, coming out of the city of Erie, and the traffic that went by his house in those early automobiles, it was horrible. Very squeaky, very loud, you know, from the suspensions. It was, or lack of suspension on the cars. So Lord came up with a method of putting suspension, especially using rubber, in between the suspension springs to quiet automobiles. And we always end the Lord story by saying that there is a Lord product in every car on the planet.
Every car.
Right?
Yep.
Well, but it really wasn't until after the company was in business, about 25 years, that a young guy with a engineering degree from the University of Pittsburgh started to work at Lord, and he came up with an adhesive that allowed you to glue rubber to steel. And his process was called a ChemLock process.
Okay.
And the beauty of this ChemLock process was that it was the rubber didn't break down during extreme temperatures of either hot or cold. Now, as we record this program today, it is
cold.
0 degrees
really
outside.
cold.
Yeah, without this process,
that,
I can tell you the rubber boots in your suspension would be just crumbling to dust right now if it wasn't for Allstadt's ChemLock process.
I want to amend something. I've heard of Don Allstadt. I was looking at the other gentleman that's
I'm
on the
sorry.
list. That's okay. That's
Okay.
I
Okay.
know Mr. In fact, I knew Mr. Allstadt. I used to see him around in various social affairs and events. And I didn't realize, though, what his connection was to Lord. Because of that engineering feat that he established. And, of course, Lord is huge. They're moving they moved their facilities out there on Robinson Road, and
right around the corner from us.
Just around the corner from where we're taping this, absolutely. So now, again, you mentioned that one of the requirements that you have to be chosen is you're no longer living, and
Yes.
it doesn't seem that Mr. Allstadt has been passed away that long ago.
Yeah, we were talking about that off camera, and my memory is that Don died within the past 5 years. But you know what?
Me
if
too.
you told me it was 10 years ago, I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah. But he was everywhere. He was I believe he was philanthropic, I think, you know. Yeah, and but his input into this was earth-shaking, as you said. You know, I mean, this is something that's spread to everybody and throughout the world. Now, can we move on to the gentleman?
Yes.
Okay.
I must have skipped. I must have messed up the order. I apologize for doing that.
This gentleman, I have not heard of. And again, I pride myself on a lot of history, and please help me along.
Okay.
Who is this gentleman, and what is his connection to somebody in the fame earlier?
William Hemrod is the man, and his connection is with Daniel Dobbins. Now, I'll explain that in just a moment. If William Hemrod was nominated just for his manufacturing, he would be a member of the Erie Hall of Fame. He had Erie Iron Works, that he grew that into an enormously successful company that became Erie Chicago Iron Works, and they supplied all of the pig iron and raw materials to the steel industry for a long time. But that's not why he's in the Erie Hall of Fame. He was born in the 1790s. He did fight in the War of 1812. He was a private in that war, not on Lake Erie. He was in the infantry. But when he came back after the war to Erie, there was a school that was just opening up on French Street. It was called the French Street School. And this was a school that was for freed African Americans that could go to this school. He became involved in it, and his involvement there got him involved in the Underground Railroad movement in this country. And a couple of things that he did. South of Erie, and when I'm saying south of Erie, southwest of Erie, think 18th Street
Yes,
as
right.
being way
Yeah.
south of Erie.
Right.
He opened up a community, bought a large tract of land there. He was a manufacturer, so he had the money to do this. And he called this neighborhood New Jerusalem. And in this neighborhood, he made housing available for primarily African Americans, but poor and folks that just needed the housing at the time. And then he got involved in the Underground Railroad movement, where he would actually help to transport incarcerated Americans, slaves,
Sure.
through Erie across the lake to freedom in Canada. And he became involved in the anti-slavery movement, that he was, hiding slaves at a time when he would have been, breaking the law.
An abolitionist.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he was. And it's interesting that somebody from his comfortable lifestyle would risk everything just so that a fellow citizen wouldn't have to live in bondage for committing no other crime, except that they were born.
The color of their skin was,
So the connection with him is when he was doing all of it, there was another guy in Erie that I like to refer to as our first citizen, and that was Daniel Dobbins. And Daniel Dobbins, as everybody knows, he built the fleet here in Erie, and by building the fleet in Erie, he built the town. We really didn't exist before that. He was pivotal in the War of 1812, everything from funding all of those ships, getting them built, and getting them back safely to Erie. But he continued to be a businessman on the lakes and things like that. And what many people don't know is that he was also transporting incarcerated slave Americans across the lakes to freedom in Canada. And he was doing this mostly near the end of his life, when William Hemrod was doing the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to we've talked about a little bit earlier. You want to submit a name that you think is up for, a nomination into the Hall. halloffame.com, halloffame.org. And it goes through the process. And how many names on average do you get? People submit to you and say,
well, initially,
this and this, and you're in there, and can you resubmit if you're not chosen?
Yeah. Initially, when we started this back in 2006 or 2007, we got a lot of nominations.
I'll bet.
We got over 200 nominations, and it was complicated to sort through all of those. But the sorting had to be done. We had to separate who was not qualified, who was, no longer living or things like that. We've saved all those nominations, so those are still very active. If anybody's wondering about somebody whose name was
submitted. They can come up for renewal?
Yeah.
Is there a qualifier? I noticed, for example, when Time Magazine chooses its Person of the Year, and sometimes it wasn't a person, I think it was a computer, I'm not sure. It doesn't matter that this person is not necessarily a good person. It's a person that had some sort of an influence, good or bad, or determined the conversation of the world, good or bad, around the particular event that occurred, or that person leading. So does this person necessarily have to be somebody that did? Because most of these people here, and most of the people you've chosen, are pretty good people. They've done some very positive things.
They are good people. I'm trying to think of somebody in the Hall that might be, because we do have military in the Hall, and in times of war, military, they defending the country, they kill. I don't know if there's anybody in the Hall of Fame that I would say, because I think that specifically in 1939, I think that Time Magazine named Adolf Hitler, right?
Okay.
Not the greatest representative from the 20th century. I don't think that we have anybody in the Hall like that. We have people that have had personalities that weren't all that great, but certainly not that would be criminal or something like that.
Okay. All right. So there's the hows, the whys, and the wins are still there. And you have all these good people, and we got a couple of minutes left. So again, a couple of minutes or so. The first one off the bat, Virginia Sorensen, author.
author. She wrote, the story Life at Maple Hill. And you know, the key to the Hall of Fame is that as you learn about these people, you should just be able to throw off one line about, you know, what's so special about this person. The only Newbery Award winner from this area.
Yeah, and again, a Newbery Award is for?
Children's literature.
Children's literature.
What's
still
typically
survives today.
Chapter books.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, a name that most people in our area are quite familiar with, Dan Rice.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? All that you have to say is he created the modern circus. That's it.
That's it.
You know, I mean, and it's that big of a thing, especially when you think of just one circus like Barnum and Bailey Brothers Circus. They call it the...
You wonder what Cirque du Soleil would
Yeah.
probably say, yeah, they can trace their heritage back. You know, they got 5 shows, I think, running in Las Vegas. I'm not sure.
All of those circuses exist under the formula that Dan Rice developed.
Yeah. Of course, this one I think too you probably know because you maybe as a child you went there in Titusville. Edwin Drake.
He did not invent oil.
No, he didn't.
Something tells me that oil was invented before Drake.
Edwin. Yeah.
But what he did is that he came up with a drill process that he was able to put a drill deep into the earth.
Right.
62 feet is nothing today.
No.
But in those days, that was huge.
That was a big deal. And then we have William Hemrod.
Right.
Abolitionist, in a sense.
Yeah, a very successful manufacturer, number one, but his key contribution is that he saw a wrong that could be righted if he put his will behind it, and that's what he did.
And last but not least, a gentleman that's associated with Lord, Don Halstead.
Don Halstead. You know, when we talk about Lord Corporation and we talk about all the great things, aerospace, everything that they do, the one thing that always amazes me is that, and that I find comfort in, is every car on this planet has a Lord product in it, and that is coming right from this community. And Lord wouldn't have been able to do it on his own, just like Walt Disney wouldn't have been able to do all those cartoons on his own. So Don Alsat coming up with the Chemlock process, that was the thing that sealed the deal for Lord.
You're the real deal, Thomas. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And of course, I want to thank you for being with us. Most enjoyable, most informative, and that's what you get here at the Mill Creek Government Channel. Thanks for joining us. I'm Phil Fatika. Until next time, take care.
You're watching the Mill Creek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.